Okay, so you already mentioned the title, maybe a bit of a long title, but this is a global framing of some major challenges that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but to put some of the numbers globally in terms of what we're dealing with in terms of food, energy, and water insecurity, you can see from a global perspective that roughly 1.3 billion people are food insecure, around 1 billion are energy insecure, and the largest number here with respect to water is around 2 billion people around the world are water insecure. And my work primarily focuses on this question of water and how to move from a situation of water insecurity to one of water security. Firstly, I think something to appreciate is that water is not just water. And again, I think most people understand this, but we don't think about it too much, especially when we're lucky to live in a country like the United States, for example, where most people around the country have access to not just water, but as we see here, to clean water, because clean water is the foundation for basically everything that we are dependent upon as human beings. Our health, the functioning of the environment, ecosystem functioning, economic development, security, and other services. And when we're thinking about other services, the most important service that we apply water to, at least in my estimation, is of course agriculture. We can't provide for food, we can't grow crops if we don't have access to water. And the question is, what kind of water do we need to be using to grow our food? So back to that earlier slide, in terms of those insecurities of food, energy, and water, of course, they're all linked one with the other. Specifically, what I'm looking at is what's called WASH. Maybe some of you are familiar with the acronym. WASH means water and sanitation and hygiene. As you can see in this little graphic here, that untreated water, sewage basically, the water that we pollute and then try to get rid of it, is shown here as 70% of this sewage water, or wastewater as we call it, is untreated. And this untreated wastewater carrying a very large number and diverse biological and chemical pollutants, if it's not being treated, it eventually finds its way into the environment, and from there can go back into humans, into plants and animals, and so on and so forth. So the challenge globally with respect to sanitation is that only 30% of the world's sewage, the world's wastewater, is being treated to some level of degree, but most of the world's wastewater or sewage is left untreated. And so my work is focusing on how to resolve this issue, at least under certain conditions, which I will address right now. So this extract from a UN report from the year 2017 helps frame the work that I do, and it says the following. It says, in a world where demands for fresh water are continuously growing, and the biggest driver of growth with respect to water is population, and where limited water resources are increasingly stressed by over-extraction, pollution, climate change, neglecting the opportunities arising from improved wastewater management, minimizing that pollution is nothing less than unthinkable, especially when we are thinking about this within the context of a circular economy with respect to using that water primarily for food, could also be for energy, of course, and other services. So the problem that I'm trying to address is one of poor sanitation and water scarcity. And we're looking at about 46% of the world's population that lacks access to sanitation. Now, some of the reasons or barriers to why wastewater, sewage is not being effectively treated can be due to technological barriers, access to appropriate technologies that can treat the water, remove the contaminants, Financial barriers, of course, any type of technology costs money. And the question is, what kind of financial systems are in place to pay for the treatment? And governmental barriers, specifically in terms of how well wastewater treatment is regulated by different governmental agencies. And when we don't treat wastewater, we have these system-wide risks in terms of pollution, waterborne disease, and water scarcity. So the lack of essential infrastructure to treat wastewater, whether it be technological, financial, governmental, and often it's all three together, is endangering human health, socioeconomic well-being, and ecological functioning, and we're trying to change that. Where we are focusing specifically and where some of the challenges are the greatest is in communities that we term off-grid. And what does off-grid mean? It basically means communities, wherever they may be around the world, that are not being adequately serviced by infrastructure to treat wastewater. And the most critical infrastructure that is needed is sewer networks and wastewater treatment facilities. So take, for example, where you guys are out there in Washington State, in Seattle. I'm assuming you're in Seattle, is that the city basically has this network of sewer pipes and pumps and other conveyances that will collect sewage from homes, from businesses, from all other facilities, bring that sewage to a localized or a centralized wastewater treatment facility where the sewage is treated so that the level of environmental risk once that sewage is discharged is limited or low. But when you are off-grid, you don't have access to those services, and we're looking at something like 1.3 billion people around the world that don't have access to these services, whether they be water, sanitation, and electricity. And the vast majority of these off-grid communities are living in rural and semi-rural communities. And until such communities are provided access to these services, little progress can be made to develop their economies and improve their lives. So again, when we are looking at resolving this issue, it's not just about the water, it's actually much larger than that, because once sanitation is addressed, quality of life improves dramatically. Now, how can you try to address this situation with respect to overcoming the lack of services for these off-grid communities? Well, there's a concept called leapfrogging. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard about it. Maybe the best example is communication devices. I don't know how many of you guys remember. Probably you don't. I don't know what the age range of the students in the class is, but I certainly remember growing up with having one phone in our house growing up. Of course, now everybody has phones that are basically in people's back pockets. And so we have leapfrogged from old and outdated technology communication into something very new that now, of course, has become conventional in its own right. And we're taking that thinking in addressing wastewater management as well. It doesn't always necessitate using outdated technologies, large, expensive systems for wastewater treatment. If we can leapfrog and provide effective treatment in a much more efficient way, both in terms of the quality of the water being treated and also the efficiencies and costs as well. And so we're looking at solving the off-grid challenges through off-grid technologies. And here you can see there are already many solutions that are already off-grid, or another term that we use is decentralized. For example, we have a vast range of renewable energies to overcome the problems of energy storage, wastewater management, which is what I'm focusing on. There are technologies like wetlands, biological treatment options using bacteria and algae, drinkable water. There's interesting ways of actually pulling condensation directly out of the atmosphere and producing drinking water. Organic waste management or solid waste that could be broken down by anaerobic bacteria, food production by using a range of different systems. For example, agrivoltaics is an interesting concept of actually putting up solar panels in agricultural fields, generating electricity on the one hand, and using the benefits of the panels as a shading or an improved microhabitat for crop production. So there's a range of solutions that already exist that could leapfrog from old thinking in providing service to new thinking in providing service. To bring us to my part of the world, where I do most of my work, this is a slide that just shows you that we are living in a water-scarce region in terms of the gap or the deficit between water supply and demand. You can see here Israel, Palestine, and Jordan are all facing some situation of water scarcity in the fact that water demand is outstripping water supply. So one thing that we're always thinking about in our part of the world is how to close the gap, how to reduce the deficit with respect to water supply and demand. And when we're looking at the specific challenge of water and hygiene and sanitation for off-grid communities in the region, these are some of the percentages of the populations. So around 70% of the population, of the Palestinian population in the West Bank is off the grid, again, not being serviced by these centralized infrastructure. In Jordan, it's roughly 30%. And in the case of Israel, it's mostly related to a specific community, which is the Bedouin, which is an indigenous ethnic minority in the south of Israel, where roughly half of that population is also considered to be off-grid. So my work focuses on addressing these populations, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. What I want to show you in this slide is the fact that all water resources are cross-border, going from wastewater generated in one locality can flow via the hydrological topography from one jurisdiction to another. So what I want to point out here is we have here Israel, and this is the green line that separates Israel from the territories of the West Bank. And these shaded areas are all watersheds that originate in the West Bank, but flow from the West Bank, crossing the green line and then entering into Israel. And this is because the West Bank is topographically higher, meaning that any rainfall or any generation of water simply by gravity is going to flow primarily westwards towards the Mediterranean Sea. So all the watersheds that we are dependent upon are cross-border in nature. But the reality of wastewater treatment is very unequal. And what I'm showing you here is a snapshot of a study that was done a few years ago to show specifically in the West Bank in terms of who has access to wastewater treatment and who doesn't. And if you just focus on the red there, you can see that sewage from Israeli settlements is about 21 million cubic meters of water per year. That's how much sewage they're generating. But most of that wastewater is treated either directly in Israel or with localized treatment within the West Bank. And around 12% is not treated and is disposed either directly or indirectly into the environment. Contrasting to that, you can see that the situation for Palestinian cities and villages is vastly different. The amount of sewage generated is about 3 times more, at about 69 million cubic meters of water per year that is generated as sewage. But over 80% of that wastewater is not treated. And the reason is that there is a difference in access to technologies, to money, to governmental abilities to treat wastewater. So part of my work is trying to close the gap, if you will, in terms of improving access to wastewater services for the Palestinian population in the West Bank. And this is not just good for the Palestinians, it's good for Israel, because any reduction of untreated wastewater on the Palestinian side of the West Bank, referring to the previous slide, means a reduction potentially of sewage that would flow from the upstream regions of the West Bank to the downstream regions of Israel. And this is showing exactly that reality. If you look at these six watersheds that are highlighted there, if you look at the arrows, all of those watersheds are collecting untreated wastewater from Palestinian communities, and then that wastewater is flowing across the border into Israel. And this is actually creating what I term an Israeli-Palestinian wastewater conflict. One of the biggest problems is how to address the situation of sewage that is crossing a political border, if you will. There's a number of issues here. I don't want to go into all of it, but one of the ones that is very controversial is a policy called the polluter pays principle, whereby Israel says that it's the Palestinians that are responsible because they are the ones polluting. And so what Israel does is they deduct from Palestinian taxes the cost of cleaning up that sewage once the wastewater flows from the Palestinian side to the Israeli side. The problem is that this policy and this calculation of how much money is required to treat the wastewater is not done under an agreement. It's done unilaterally. And this actually exacerbates Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, disagreements over how to effectively treat wastewater. There are other issues there that are mentioned on the slide, but I don't want to get too bogged down in this. And also, I want to make sure that I get through all of my slides. This illustrates how much money is being deducted without any agreement from the Palestinian economy by Israel in order to pay for the treatment of sewage that is generated by Palestinians upstream, but treated by Israelis downstream. So if you look there, the latest number we have there is from the year 2015, where about 80 million shekels was deducted for the treatment of wastewater. The line in yellow, the line in orange is how much Palestinians pay for potable water. I think we can jump that slide. So this is the result. This is what you see here. You see the wastewater flowing. You can see how polluted the environment is with respect to the garbage and the color and the turbidity of the water. This is exactly what's happening when there's no access to effective treatment. And so to summarize, in the West Bank or for Palestinians, what people do throughout the territory is they rely mostly on septic tanks, but these septic tanks are very poorly managed, and oftentimes they overflow or the wastewater percolates into groundwater, which pollutes the groundwater. And oftentimes the wastewater is just discharged, like you saw in the previous picture, directly into the environment. This is showing you what happens when a cesspit or a septic tank is pumped, but there's no receiving wastewater treatment facility to accept the sewage. And so they just drive to a certain spot in the environment, and you can see how they're just discharging without any oversight raw sewage directly into the environment. And this is again, because of lack of access to appropriate technologies to treat wastewater. Now, on the opposing side, on the Israeli side, wastewater management is extremely efficient. And not only is it efficient, it's also helping to contribute to overcoming the water deficit in Israel, in the sense of treating up to 93% of the wastewater and using about 80% of that in agriculture. So this is bringing us to the next part of what I'm looking at, is that the question is that if you are going to invest a lot of money, technology, and other issues into treating wastewater, the best use of that wastewater once it's treated is to recycle it and reuse it, specifically in agriculture, because agriculture is the largest consumer of water. And the reuse of wastewater in agriculture is a very, very effective management tool and program to overcome water scarcity, which, as I alluded to in earlier on, is a challenge that we're facing. So Israel has done this very successfully, where more and more of Israel's crops for food are being irrigated, and not with fresh water, which is becoming more and more scarce, but with treated wastewater. Now, in the West Bank, there are some systems for wastewater treatment, but you can see here that hardly any, actually none of these facilities are using the wastewater once it's reused. It's all being discharged directly into the environment. Now, what happens is, once that wastewater is discharged, even though it's treated, it very quickly becomes polluted again from other sources that are not being serviced by these facilities. So part of our work is to try to understand this reality of how many people, communities are not connected to sewer infrastructure and wastewater treatment. So this is an example of one of the areas where we're working in. This is in southern Israel and the West Bank. And everything that's covered in purple is Palestinian population, including the city of Hebron, which is one of the largest Palestinian towns in the West Bank, cities. And everything that is in purple is off the grid, meaning that there's no effective wastewater collection infrastructure. On the Israeli side, you can see more or less the opposite. Everything in green is mostly areas that are effectively serviced. Now, what happens is because the purple is upstream from the green, in a sense, any sewage that is not treated by the Palestinians is effectively going to flow and pollute the downstream areas in Israel, and that then triggers that unilateral response from Israel in terms of the polluter pays principle that I also alluded to earlier on. Now, what are we doing? We are trying to introduce new and novel technologies that are effectively off the grid in their own way to provide effective wastewater treatment and reuse in agriculture. So you can see here, we are trying to find and implement innovative technologies that can solve some of these problems that I just mentioned. What we have developed is a technology that is firstly energy autonomous. Yeah, in other words, it doesn't require any kind of connection to an electricity grid. It runs off solar energy primarily. We reduce almost to zero sludge. Now, what is sludge? Sludge is the sediment that settles out of wastewater, and this is one of the biggest waste products that come out of wastewater treatment plants is the sludge. We also make use of new technologies to remotely monitor and operate these facilities, meaning that we can locate these small off-grid on-site technologies in quite remote areas without having to have any person being effectively on-site for operation and maintenance. We can locate them also within urban spaces because there's very minimal nuisance in terms of odor and noise, and they can be scaled to meet growing needs as the population grows. And the final point there is to use the treated wastewater, what we call effluent, for agricultural and other non-potable uses. So in essence, what we're trying to do is to find the most effective solution to overcoming the lack of access to centralized services for wastewater and sewer treatment. And so we are bridging this sanitation gap, if you will, for remote communities, for communities that are off the grid, and unlocking, by treating and recycling wastewater, an effective, high-quality, nutrient-rich water that is suitable for irrigation. So we're solving two problems with one approach. We are treating wastewater, so we're solving an environmental hazard, a public health hazard, and adding value by bringing that water back for food production. So this is just some pictures of how the technology looks like, what we've been developing in our research and development, and are now moving from R&D to actual commercialization. We call the system Laguna Innovation, or the name of the company that we're establishing is called Laguna Innovation. Compact, sludge-free, simple to install, modular, and operated by solar panels, as you can see in the pictures. This is an example of one of our first projects that we did with the Palestinians, implementing a system, as you can see here, that is treating about 25 cubic meters of wastewater per day. The impact of this project is that the treated wastewater is being used by farmers that live in the vicinity of the project for the irrigation of olive trees. And we are able to provide irrigation water for around 300 olive trees in a nearby orchard to where the system is operational. So here you can see some of the pictures of how we bring it in on a truck. So again, very easy to install, completely autonomous, no need for any electrical connections and so on and so forth. Okay, the Bedouin, another community that we work in. This is now in Israel. You can see in this picture how remote the communities are, very arid conditions, and also you can see completely off the grid in terms of water, wastewater, energy, access to roads, and so on and so forth. This is what happens in these areas when wastewater is not treated. Again, it is discharged into the environment. You can see here how the heavy level of the high levels of turbidity by the cloudiness of the water, which is a strong indicator of very, very polluted water. And what is important to take away from this picture is the risk being posed to people because of the animals that are being watered in this highly polluted stream. And then, of course, these animals are going to be eaten. And so there is a very direct linkage between untreated wastewater in the environment and high levels of disease risk to people. And here you see that being said in these 2 points, that there's a direct connection between exposure to sewage due to lack of infrastructure and people's morbidity. Diarrheal disease constitutes the leading cause of hospitalization in Bedouin infants. So these are the public health impacts to the picture you just saw previously. And this is how people try to address the situation in the Bedouin communities. You can see here very haphazard, very rudimentary, basically just a hole with some kind of a metal covering. You can see here an open channel of sewage is flowing into this very rudimentary collection vessel. You can see on the other picture here that sewage is pooling directly from a pipe coming out of a house around trees, which of course means that these trees are now taking up high levels of pollution through their root systems. So this is an example of a Laguna project in a Bedouin community in Israel. This is a small system of about 6 cubic meters per day. And what's interesting about this project is that we are using our technology to treat the wastewater from a school that services on a daily basis over 1,000 pupils, where they have no access in their homes to any kind of toilet facilities. And at the school where there are toilets, prior to our intervention, the sewage from the toilets was also being flushed directly into the environment. So just try to manage the lack of sanitation and what that means for a conducive environment for learning. Now, one thing that's very important in our work, especially when we are addressing the reuse of wastewater in agriculture, is the safety question. And the way to ensure that treated wastewater is not going to cause a disease risk in terms of food production is to regulate the quality of the wastewater according to government standards. So we have standards that go back 20 plus years, both in Israel and Palestine. You can see they're similar, but the Palestinian regulations are slightly less strict than the Israeli ones. But you can see here basically the variety of water quality parameters and then the levels that have to be reached for two uses. First is unrestricted irrigation, and the second is for discharge of that sewage into the environment, into river systems. So a big part of my work is to ensure not only that we have good and well-designed technology, but that technology is meeting government regulatory standards for safe and effective reuse of wastewater in food production. So this kind of regulatory framework is a very important part of our work. And this means that we have to do a lot of water quality testing of our treated wastewater. So here we have some students from my organization, from the Arava Institute, that are doing field sampling of the water quality, as you can see here. We're also using remote monitoring water quality sensors that could do this work remotely by putting in sensors that measure certain parameters, like you can see there on the left, and then communicating the data, the water quality data, directly through internet or a cellular connection to an online database. So you can see here a snapshot of some of the water quality data we can get that is done through remote monitoring technologies. And we're constantly looking to develop and expand the remote monitoring, because at the end of the day, it's much more efficient than going out into the field and collecting data that way. We are very pleased that the results coming from our water quality testing for our technology is meeting or even exceeding the standards. You can see here we're getting very, very high levels of percentage improvements in water quality based on both field sampling, lab sampling, and also remote monitoring sampling. However, there is a constant concern that is growing throughout the world, including in the United States, when the issue of wastewater and food production is discussed. And that is what we call contaminants of emerging concern. And this is mostly the question of antibiotics and herbicides and other types of chemicals that are discharged into the sewer. And we did a research that was published in the year 2020, looking at whether or not we can actually pick up these contaminants post-treatment. As you can see here, the results are that we are finding these contaminants in our effluent. And the question is, what is the safety risk? What is the epidemiological issue here that we need to be concerned about? There isn't yet any overarching agreement or consistency on what should be the acceptable levels of these contaminants in effluent. There's quite a raging debate within the scientific community across the world on what those safety parameters and acceptable risk factors need to be. So it's actually an exciting place to be doing a lot of research, which we are involved in. Another example of our work is addressing wastewater from industry. In this case, this is a dairy farm, one of the largest dairy farms in the West Bank. And you can see here there are two problems. One is the raw sewage that's coming out of the dairy farm. This is the farm of 350 cows. You can see that the sewage is just pooling in the environment. The other problem with dairy farms is the cow manure. And on a daily basis, it's estimated that this farm is producing about 5,000 kilograms of cow manure or solid waste per day. So we were asked by this dairy to address not just the water problem, the lack of sanitation, lack of effective wastewater treatment, but also the problem of solid waste coming out of the dairy. And this is bringing us into the circular economy and Nexus concepts of linking water, food, and energy, because what we are doing at the dairy farm is not only treating wastewater and using that recycled water for irrigation, but also generating biogas from the solid waste, and therefore actually also helping to improve energy and electricity. So we have here an example of an energy, water, and food nexus. We are generating biogas from wastewater. We are mitigating water pollution by treating the wastewater and using it for irrigation. And of course, that is then helping to improve food access and food security. And also, very importantly, you can see there that we are also having a positive economic impact by saving the dairy farm upwards of $4,000 a month on electricity and gas costs. So this is the area that we are excited about, is that the interventions that I've been addressing here up until now really can take you quite far forward in addressing water and water-related issues, in this case, the water, energy, food nexus. And so we like to think of our work as going from waste to wealth by unlocking productive value of treated wastewater. We are helping communities that are off the grid, Palestinian, Bedouin, of course. We're also working out internationally in Africa. For example, we are helping communities transition towards a circular economy while mitigating risk factors associated with sewer pollution. We're, of course, meeting a variety of SDG targets, primarily SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation for all. And another example of economic benefit is in the project for the olive tree irrigation. We are taking measurements, and we are seeing increases of olive oil yields by as much as 50%, and that is improving the income or the revenue per farm per year of upwards of $5,000 per farmer that is now being able to access this high quality water for irrigation. I think that might, okay, one or two more slides. When one considers decentralized wastewater treatment, to sort of summarize, these are the opportunities that we are looking to address: environmental protection, in the limitation or a reduction of pollution into groundwater, improvements of public health by minimizing exposure to sewage, providing services, irrigation, food security, energy, and so forth. Another important element is when you provide these technologies at a community level, you're also providing a sense of autonomy to communities, improving their development, saving them money, and generating income. We also are able to offer much more cost-effective solutions than a centralized system, because a centralized system requires a high capital investment for sewer grids. And when we come in with these on-site facilities, no sewer grids are needed. And in the case of the Israeli-Palestinian wastewater conflict that I mentioned earlier, we don't need to wait for any overarching political settlement between Israelis and Palestinians. We can immediately, and we are implementing and addressing these problems directly with Palestinian partners on the ground. And this is the points that we have to keep in mind as we consider how to scale and move towards sustainability. So wherever we work, we must engage very directly with the community, that the community is not just being looked at as a beneficiary, but is a full partner and is fully bought into the process. Government support is essential, especially in the case of regulation and meeting water quality standards for reuse, as I showed you those governmental standards. You need to build local institutions to manage these systems, what we call few utilities. Few simply means food, energy, water. You need to ensure that there are people in the community that have the ability to take care of operational maintenance, whether it be these field testing or operating these remote monitoring sensors that I showed you. Extension services are one way to do this, to provide training to people on how to best use the technology. Because we can see through some of the examples I mentioned that you can generate income, this can help to promote and incentivize business initiatives that are local. One issue that is extremely important, at least in the work that we're doing, is what we term beyond aid. And beyond aid simply means to help communities move beyond reliance on development aid and to move beyond the reliance on donor-driven projects. Once one goes beyond donor-driven aid, you are in the appropriate place to address and to improve and to move towards sustainability. So these are all the kinds of points and issues we have to be thinking about when we do the work that we do. And we are always conscientious to try to address these issues wherever we work, whether it be for the Palestinians, the Bedouin, or anywhere else in the world. And I think, yep, that's it. That's my last slide. So I hope I was being clear and everybody was able to hear and follow along. I'll stop sharing and I'll turn it back over to Yona. And if there are questions or comments, I hope we have some time left for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clive. If you can find those applause buttons again, please share your appreciation. Clive, we could do the whole seminar just on the many different ways that your work and your innovations touch so many SDGs. I mean, you mentioned 8 of them, I think, but you know, there's probably even connections beyond that. And I'm just so appreciative of hearing about both the problem and the solution space that you're working in. And this is just there's such dramatic and tangible impacts on communities. So I want to encourage everybody to please take the next 4 minutes, drop your questions into the chat, and Carolyn is monitoring that. And while we're waiting for you to do that, I just wanted to, Clive, start with a question. You mentioned community buy-in at the end, and I was wondering about that as well. I noticed in your videos that I encourage everybody to review if you haven't had a chance, but the short videos that you shared with us beforehand, you had some of the community members actually speaking about the technologies or even engaging with them. And so do you train community members to support the ongoing maintenance and testing, some of the water testing that you had your students doing? Are community members involved as well ever?
Yeah, so for every project, we work with the community to identify an individual or individuals that we can provide training to. It's essential. You know, capacity is essential. It's not always easy or straightforward to find the right person and to sort of find the right sort of incentives to get that person involved. A lot of that depends on how well, you know, structured, if you will, the community is. And oftentimes it takes time to do that. So none of these projects, you know, you really have to spend a lot of time, even before you get to the actual project itself, to really engage and really understand where the community is coming from and how they think about things and how they've been doing things. And because you're providing value, you're providing improvements that they are very aware of and appreciative of. But at the same time, you know, they're very set in their ways. And you have to understand those cultural values, those social values, and it takes time. So we do a lot of what we term, you probably know as well, stakeholder engagement and consultation. For example, to get people to understand, for example, the value of treated wastewater is not a given. So even farmers that are suffering from lack of water, and you say to them, well, we can provide you good quality water, but it's from wastewater, they need to sort of process what that means. There's a learning curve. And oftentimes their first reaction is, no, we don't want the water, because they don't you know, I don't want to say they don't know, but you have to work with them for them to see that water actually is safe. And there's a lot of resistance, which is very understandable, to say, wait, do you want me to take, water that is polluted and not irrigate with that water? There's oftentimes an embedded initial resistance that you can't dismiss it. You have to work through the community to overcome that resistance. And oftentimes the best way to do that is through the results. So to show that the yields are improving, you're generating money, and then all of a sudden they start to, understand the linkages, and then, you can move towards, bigger goals of scalability, sustainability, and so on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Carolyn, do you have any questions? Is that what you hopped on? I think we have time for one, if we can squeeze it in.
We have a couple of questions in the chat. Gabriel asked, what does the vertical green wall component do in the system?
Yeah, so I must maybe apologize. I didn't really talk about the actual technology as much, but that's a very good question, because why do we use the term vertical green wall? Because we are using what is called a biological filter to treat the chemical and the biological contaminants in the water, and we do that by growing a biofilm made up mostly of algae on a series of hanging sheets, and that's why we call it the vertical green wall, because it's like blinds in your home or curtains, and they act as a surface area on which to grow the biofilm. Now, why are we doing it vertically? So that, as you saw from the pictures, so the systems are extremely compact. Most biofiltration technologies are done with horizontal flow of water, like a constructed wetland, for example, or just, or using large pools. And that takes up a lot of space. And we wanted to sort of reverse engineer that, where we can get the same results, but with minimum footprint. And so that's why we turned this from a horizontal treatment facility, which is mostly what you would find conventionally, to something that is vertical. So, and we're getting very good results out of the interaction of the biofilm hanging on these sheets in terms of the water quality. So that's in simple terms, something about the engineering behind how the technology works.
Thank you, Clive. I feel like in the interest of time, I'm going to release the students, but I also, just because it's such a gift to be on the line with you, Clive, wonder if you're able to stay for one more question after we dismiss the class, just to get this opportunity in. So thanks to everybody for participating. And if you're able to stick around for 5 more minutes, please feel free. And otherwise, we really look forward to your reflections, and have a safe and fun evening ahead. And Carolyn, please, with your last question.
The other question, actually, I think you answered.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so then let's just take this opportunity to close out. Clive, maybe you can stick around with me for a couple minutes afterwards, so we can just keep chatting for a moment. But most of all, I just want to share huge appreciation for the incredible work you're doing and taking the time to speak with us. So thanks, everybody.